It's really my distinct pleasure to welcome all of you here to this historic event. At Wesleyan University, we strive for the full engagement of our academic community in not only scholarly issues, but also in the pressing issues of our day. And with that in mind, we are honored and privileged to host this national conference on pricing carbon. The presence of so many students at this conference is critical because it is my generation and your generation who have to work together to write the course of the world.
What we tried to do is look at what is absolutely essential. The first thing, the most important thing, is to put a price on CO2 pollution so that alternatives, low carbon alternatives, have a chance to grow and replace the dirty fossil fuels, the dirty energy.
John Larson is the United States Representative for Connecticut's 1st Congressional District. Welcome to Wesleyan, John.
Jeremy briefly described the bill that I am the proud author of, which is the Energy Security and Trust Fund Act. And I am going to be deeply honored and proud to introduce it again in this Congress. I think it's clear that what people expect, especially those who I've talked to in the business community, is certainty. And what we know can be achieved by the pricing of carbon is certainty. And we know if we provide for the contingencies that we know will happen along the way, if we tax pollution at its source, if we pass on the savings to the consumer, if we provide for the research and development of alternative energies, we have to be involved and committed and engaged. That is the only way that change is going to come about.
It is an honor to welcome Bill McKibben here tonight, a climate champion, writer, and inspiration to the global movement demanding climate solutions. In 2009, he co-founded 350.org.
One of the big problems with cap and trade was that it was extraordinarily difficult to get people to understand what on earth one was talking about. The problem is that the fossil fuel industry gets to use the atmosphere as an open sewer into which to dump for free their waste. Okay? That's basically the problem. And the reason that they're the most profitable industry on earth is because they get to do that. And the reason that they will fight is because that's their secret to their wealth, that they have a free sewer. And what we're trying to do is put a price on that sewer, so do not expect them to take it lying down or happily or anything else.
The significance of this is getting the best minds on this issue together in front of a big, committed audience that's willing to kind of light the spark of a movement. It's going to take a movement for us to put a price on carbon, nothing less.
The information around carbon pricing and global warming is being discussed by people from different communities. You have a bunch of people coming together who don't generally talk to one another. And they're coming together and they're talking about a like concern, and that's what makes it significant.
This conference is really exciting for this many people coming together to focus on the strongest solution that we could really have and the best solution, and a lot of people showing a lot of excitement about that. Having a strong solution like a carbon tax is what's really going to re-energize the movement.
We felt very strongly that the climate crisis was not just an environmental issue, but it also had to do with fundamental issues of justice and equity, social and economic, and we have representatives from those constituencies here today.
This first plenary panel, there are 4. This is the foundation stone for this entire conference. It's the economic rationale for pricing carbon, and let's face it, it's the economic rationale that drives many of us, including the organizers of this event, toward a carbon tax or carbon fee.
Investment in mitigation is limiting this pricing carbon. It doesn't specify that certain desirable futures will occur, it just makes them more likely. For groups like this and for organizers, that becomes part of the difficulty in communicating. Because you're really buying a reduced likelihood, and how do you go out and see that? It's not like the new Chevrolet, you can't see it and drive around and it's not blue.
The new argument to beat is the argument that, yes, it's happening, but it's too expensive to do something about it. It turns out that it's too expensive actually implies it's optional. Right? It's correctly used in the sentence, I'd like to go on vacation in France, but it's too expensive. It's incorrectly used in this sentence, we're under attack from terrorists, but it's too expensive to do anything about it. And so the question is, right, which is climate policy more like an optional vacation or defending ourselves against a threat to our way of life? You all know the answer to that.
In 1988 and 1999, the people believing that we needed to do something about climate change, there were an equal number of Democrats and Republicans. Beginning in about 2000, those two lines diverge. And now we have a party that is, one party that is devoted to climate change, the Democrats, and we have one party in which most of the climate change deniers fall, the Republicans. We can't achieve big public policy changes with a partisan difference like that.
Please join me in welcoming Dr. James Hansen.
Thanks very much. Human-made climate change is a huge moral, political, and legal issue because the people who are causing the problem, and that's us, the older generations, are not the ones who are going to suffer the consequences. Just to briefly mention a couple of climate tipping points. One of them is the ice sheets. As the ocean gets warmer, it melts the ice shelves, which are the tons of ice that come out from the ice sheets into the ocean. And as those buttressing ice shelves disappear, then the ice sheet can discharge ice to the ocean much more rapidly. As the last ice sheet melted 14,000 years ago, sea level went up 5 meters a century for several centuries. That's 1 meter every 20 years. So you don't want to get to that point. As long as fossil fuels are the cheapest energy, people are going to keep using them. Of course, why are they cheapest? Partly because they're subsidized, but mainly because they don't have to pay their cost to society. The human health effect of air and water pollution from fossil fuels is enormous, and those medical bills are borne entirely by the public. Fossil fuel companies don't have to pay for that, nor do they have to pay for the damage to the environment or to the future of young people. We have to make the fossil fuels pay for their true costs. That means apply a fee, but it has to be very simple. It should be across the board at the first sale, at the domestic mine or the port of entry. And all of the money, I think, has to be returned to the public. You do not want Congress trying to decide where they're going to invest this money. In that way, the marketplace will make the decisions as to what the winning technologies are. And that's a point which Republicans, by the way, and conservatives can appreciate. Sophie is my first grandchild, and so she was writing a letter to President Obama, and she wrote some very sensible things. She said, "Why don't you listen to my grandfather?"
We need the days of action that 350.org has organized so successfully over the last couple of years, where thousands and thousands of places in the world see people taking action collectively. We need to bring those forward. We need to look for opportunities for more of those kinds of national, international expressions of the popular will.
We have two purposes. The first purpose is to create the political will for a stable climate. To create the political will for a stable climate. The second one is to empower ordinary people, little people like me, to have breakthroughs in exercising their personal and political power. Each of the great social achievements has come about not because of government proclamations, but because people organized, made demands, and made it good politics for governments to respond. It's a political will of the people that makes and sustains the political will of government.
We have majority. We have a majority of people who want to see good climate, effective climate policy happen. And it's not happening. So why isn't it happening?
There's this really nice level of tension here between kind of the wonkiness and the people that kind of work inside the system and the activist side of it. And you know, most of that is shared within all of us, that wonkiness and the activist. And it's that creative tension that's happening here of how we combine those two in the most effective ways.
This session, we're going to hear from 3 members of Congress, and they're going to describe to you today the political realities, the obstacles, the opportunities, so we can really have some feeling for what it is like for a legislator to go back and face the new Congress.
I'm a carbon tax person, and it is a very pleasant surprise to see so many people. The reason I say that is because this issue's fallen off the radar screen for most people in America. And what's important about what you're doing here and what you will do in the various places that you have an impact is to keep it on the radar screen for people in this country. I didn't need to come up here, okay? No votes in here for me. But I came up here because I wanted to see whether it actually would work. And you give me faith.
I'm here to give you a Republican definition of sustainability. And no, it's not having an extended range gas tank on your SUV. I know that's what some of you would think, but no, I'm here for a different definition of sustainability, which is making a profit. How would you like to compete with a restaurant that gets maybe free or subsidized food? And you're across the street trying to compete with that restaurant. Well, that's the situation with all the renewables competing with the incumbent technologies of coal and petroleum. And until you force those fuels to internalize their negative externalities and be responsible for them, back to that key constituency, that's a thing called accountability. That's a biblical concept. That's what we should be all over as conservatives.
I was one of the first freedom riders in 1961 and spent several months in the What I learned from that experience, forget the personal stuff, is looking back, if you get involved in the political life of your nation, of this nation, you can actually change history. You had a president in 1960, John Kennedy. He was not as liberal as Mr. Obama is, but he represented change. He was the first president born in the 20th century. He didn't have a program of civil rights. We gave it to him. We forced it on him.
Passover is about a Pharaoh who tries to oppress human beings, the earth rebels, and Pharaoh is overthrown. The Sabbath is about the chance to pause, to take joy. Palm Sunday in the Christian tradition is a memory of a demonstration carried on against the Roman Empire, with people waving palm branches the way we would demonstrate in front of the White House, waving placards. What about turning our religious practices, our symbols, our ceremonies, our rituals, powerful stuff, into affirming God's creation?
We have to start talking about the truth, telling the truth to our people. We need to become prophets, and I'm talking about those wild-eyed, dark desert prophets like Muhammad and Jesus and Jeremiah and Gandhi, who were not popular, because they were telling the truth to the people. They tried to stone them, they killed most of them, and that is the posture we must now assume.
I believe that the youth in the urban context, they're not getting this information. As a matter of fact, they're being miseducated or undereducated when it comes to what's going on with our planet and what's going on with their lives. They have been taught thereby in being consumers to be destroyers of the very earth in which we stand on. Not to replenish the earth. Not to give back and not to nurture and not to care for the earth.
The most effective way to reach a member of Congress, is a letter to the editor. They read these every day. Their staff reads them every day. They really carry a lot of influence, and believe it or not, they're probably about one of the best read things in the newspaper. So not only can you influence a member of Congress with a letter to the editor, but you can also, get your message out to a lot of people.
If you cut payroll taxes, you use the revenue, the revenue return mechanism, so that it isn't, going into government, it isn't making a bigger bureaucracy that conservatives can object to. But if you're spending all the revenue that's coming in from carbon tax on reducing payroll taxes, you're going to unleash massive job creation. We've subsidized the consumption of stuff and the production of carbon pollution, and we have taxed the heck out of employment and people's right to work and contribute to the economy and have sustainable livelihoods and good lives. If that equation can shift, there will be all kinds of movement building and messaging opportunities that we don't have now.
For a very long time, reporters, in an attempt to maybe be fair and balanced, would always take the word of a scientist who has spent many, many years studying one particular aspect of the climate, and they'll take their message and their study, which usually says, yes, climate change is real, we're causing it, it's very serious, and here's why we have to pay attention. And then they'll take the word of a fossil fuel financed expert and put them back to back. So we have 1-to-1, when in reality, everybody here probably knows that the real truth is, among the scientific community, it's about 99-to-1.
Yes, there are real villains in this in the mix here, but there are a lot of people who are extraordinarily well read who are just reading the wrong stuff. They are reading the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and the Los Angeles Times, and they're coming away with a sincere and they think well-established, well-founded doubt that climate change is all that clear. But they didn't get there accidentally. They got there because wretched people led them there by the nose.
But let's try to remember also who our true opponents are. Our opponents are not any people in this room whom we may disagree with over strategy or tactics or mechanism to get where we want to go. Our opponents are the Koch brothers and Peabody Coal and Valero Oil, who are pouring pollution into the atmosphere, they're poisoning our lungs, destabilizing our climate, and they're pouring millions of dollars into deceptive political activities, poisoning our politics. So let's try to remember that that's the true opposition. But we can actually start to internalize the cost of burning fossil fuels using the Clean Air Act. Under the Massachusetts versus EPA Supreme Court decision, EPA has that authority and responsibility. They will exercise it unless Congress takes that power away. But make no mistakes, there will be a very serious attempt to take that power away from EPA over the next couple of years. And we need to unite, as we never have before, in defending that in order to make progress over this period.
What both cap and dividend and fee and dividend have in common are these three main features. One is that they are both upstream, economy-wide. They capture and put a price on the carbon as it enters the economy, so that gets all the carbon. And along with that, they have a mechanism, both of them, for steadily raising the price over time. Second, they both return most, if not all, of the income in the form of dividends to all Americans equally. And third, neither of them involves any trading of hypothetical Wall Street created pieces of paper that are often referred to as offsets. So we have to design the system so that the American people don't get cold feet as the price goes up, but in fact are eager for the price to go up because their dividend checks will go up automatically along with the carbon prices, and a majority going to come out ahead financially. This is a winner for a majority of the American people.
All that we know is that we've got to get off of carbon as quickly as we can. That's the imperative. There's no magic number, it's a magic direction, and that direction is down. And to get down off of carbon as fast as possible and ubiquitously as possible, that price incentive has to be clear, transparent, and rising. Households, institutions, government, all have a myriad of things to worry about. And what's going to put energy-saving opportunities and the transition to clean energy on their radar screen is going to be the returns that they can earn, because the price incentive is making it super profitable, too profitable to ignore, to save energy or to transit out of fossil energy to clean energy.
While you do need the grassroots organizing and you do need, those community level solutions, you also need, the big systematic changes. And I think a price on carbon is that first step. So coming to the conference and learning more about what that meant was important to me, as well as using this as a venue to get to know more people, more organizations, and bring students together.
Well, I think we came because we, as many other in the climate movement, are very frustrated with our inability to affect change. We feel a need to come together with people who understand sometimes, just to reaffirm to ourselves that we're not crazy, because otherwise we feel like this can't possibly be happening. We must be having a bad dream.
The title of this session is called Moving Beyond the Traditional Environmental Movement. Without that, if we can't move beyond, if we don't move beyond, if we don't continue moving beyond the traditional environmental movement, we really have no hope of solving this huge crisis and this huge problem.
I've seen the kind of success that comes from building coalitions. The more diverse your coalition, the larger it grows. The more allies you bring into it, the more powerful you get, and the more likely you are to win battles. Outreach, as you heard yesterday, to unlikely allies, just visiting and talking to people can make a difference. When you get those, you start getting, it's harder and harder then for a politician to pigeonhole a group. Oh, well, they're just this set.
Future 500 is a group that builds coalitions, often between groups that begin by hating each other, between groups on the left and on the right, between corporations and activist groups. We have allies in places that we have never imagined. Every community out there has folks that support the objectives that you want to reach, and they need to be found and brought into the coalitions because they are the margin of victory. The reality is there is a potential to pass a carbon tax across the board in the United States. There is a coalition in waiting.
Right now, as many of us know, we are a relative minority, in terms of environmentalism and climate activism. And it's time that we really come together and commit to long-term goals that are consistent and are ones that we can encourage our peers and other organizations to coalesce around.
It's really important for us to recognize that our grassroots organizing work is about bringing a people-centered policy around the climate crisis, a people-centered set of solutions around the climate crisis. And that means that we have to take our voices into the halls and, yes, make it more challenging for the lawmakers to actually do the wrong thing.
Bill Shireman would not be able to do what he is doing without the Tims and the Katies and all of us others activists here. It is that very strong, powerful uprising which is bringing corporations to the table. So they're not our allies, they are our adversaries, but that doesn't mean we can't make them change.
Remember and think about Jim Hansen, Don't just think about Jim Hansen as the leading climate scientist, certainly in the United States, if not in the world. Think about Jim Hansen, the human being, and the journey that he's on. Jim Hansen could be retired. Jim Hansen didn't have to start to get involved in the grassroots movement and go to demonstrations and get himself arrested in West Virginia and get himself arrested in front of the White House fighting against mountaintop removal. But he did that because he's serious about this issue, and he's willing to challenge himself to grow and to do things that he's not comfortable with at first.
And so if we want our political leaders to go down that path of standing up to the fossil fuel industry, we have to create an even bigger crisis if they don't. And I think that's the first thing that we have to think about when we're ready to go beyond the environmental movement, is to make sure that we're actually a movement and not just lobbyists. It's probably too late to prevent the collapse of our industrial civilization as we know it. Things are probably going to get pretty ugly. And it's time for our movement to start thinking about what kind of power structures we want to be in place when things fall apart. Because right now we've had a little minor collapse in the financial system over the past few years. And what we've seen is unprecedented hostility towards immigrants and people of other religions that wasn't around a few years ago. And we're saying, oh, those immigrants, they're causing our problems because they're using our social services, they're taking our jobs. And we're seeing that extreme hateful rhetoric against them. And they're our natural allies in this, because how we approach the climate crisis is being determined by how we approach the immigration issue today. If hatred wins the day today, we're in for a very dark tomorrow. And that's why we need to be allied with those social justice groups that we really want to be creating a just future no matter what happens ahead. Thank you.
We have to get the subsidies out of oil. We have to stop our economies from being based on carbon. And this conference was a way to involve a large cross-section of the major groups associated with that. And importantly, we had 350 students, both from Wesleyan University and the Students for a Just and Stable Future, participating. They are our hope.
One of the most encouraging things about this conference was that we had such a diverse group of people. Not only students, not only progressive students, but we had Republicans, we had business people, we had people of color, we had all kinds of people that primarily concerned with social justice issues, people involved with organic farming and organic food, all convening around a theme that, when you come right down to it, pricing carbon is the most effective, most equitable, and most rapid way of dealing with our greenhouse gas emissions.